Welcome, everybody. This wonderful Sunday morning in sunny Phoenix, Arizona, talking about location. We are probably have the best weather in the country, I would think. We have power. We don't have snow on the ground. We don't expect any because it's Phoenix. And it's supposed to be, right now, it's 41 degrees and we're going to be up to 60 today. So not to be, make anybody envious of coming to Phoenix because we just happen to be, winter here is fabulous. So the topic of our session this morning is keeping it local. And we have 5 great authors that we're going to talk to a little bit this morning. And a couple of housekeeping things first, for those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom. So set your view to gallery. That way you can see all of our smiling faces at the same time. We have a chat. There's chat buttons at the bottom of the screen. You can click on chat. If you have any questions for the group, just put it in the Q&A and I'll be monitoring both of those. And we should have some time at the end to answer any questions that you all might have. So I'm going to make a quick round of introductions before we get into the topic. So I will start with Spencer. So Spencer Greene is the author of Stolen Kiss. She's got a new book coming out in February called Never a Bridesmaid. She writes contemporary romance and loves reading and watching queer media of all types. And when she's not writing, she likes making music and riding her bike around the city. And that's one of our first questions, Spencer, is where is the city? Where do you live?
The city is Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah, that is the city I'm biking around. Not right now, it's a little cold, but soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Next we have Anna. Anna is an English literature and museum studies graduate. She's got a passion for LGBTQ heritage. Her debut model, Highland Fling, was a finalist in the 2018 Golden Crown Literary Society Awards. Her second novel, Love's Pursuit, was a finalist in the 2019 Forward Indies Book of the Year Awards. Her third novel, Highland Whirl, was featured in the Lambda Literary December 2021 Most Anticipated LGBTQ Books, which is quite the thing, Anna, quite the thing. Great deal. Her latest release, Invisible, which is a new adult lesbian romance set in a fancy dress costume shop, featured in Diva Magazine's December 2023 Hottest Queer Releases. So her poems have also been published with Paradise Press and the University of, say that for me, Anna?
Leicester.
Say that again?
University of Leicester.
Leicester. Okay, great. So that's a little bit about Anna. And Anna, where is home now?
Well, funny enough, talking of Leicester, it's the city of Leicester. So I'm obviously across the Atlantic in the UK. And Leicester's probably best known, Julie, for having a king buried underneath its car park. People think of us for King Richard, but it's as we'll find out together today, it's an amazing city, and it's a really rich resource for all things imagination. So Leicester. And
where is that relative to a major city or location that those of us that are geographically Europe geographically challenged?
Yeah, so if you think of the middle of the UK, it's called the Midlands. So you've got Birmingham, perhaps, where you might be flying it to. It's about, I would say it's about an hour and a half above London. And it's kind of to the east, so it's called the East Midlands. Yeah, so the Midlands.
Great. And what time are you, what's your time zone?
Well, we are at 4:05 in the afternoon, so it's kind of dusky out of my window.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, Anna. Now we have Kris Bryant. Kris writes contemporary romance and erotica. She enjoys binge watching shows, snacking, and working with animal shelters around the world through her Patreon page. And she's presently working on her 21st full-length novel with Bold Strokes Books. And Kris, what is your alter ego when you write the erotica?
My alter ego is Britt Ryder.
Britt Ryder. Okay. Got it. Thank you. And where is home for you, Kris?
Well, home for me is the nice, balmy city of Kansas City. in the middle of the United States, where we are frozen. And if you watched any of the playoffs last night, you would know that we were at like -10 with a -29 wind chill, something like that. It's awful here. It's absolutely awful.
Mm. Well, winter where you are is probably like summer where in Phoenix, where you just don't go outside.
Yeah, it's not this cold usually. I mean, this is like some sort of crazy polar vortex crap.
Crap. I like that. That's the official phrase. Okay, next we'll move on to Ursula. Ursula is originally from Maryland, where she grew up and attended university. She taught ESL in Europe after college and returned to the US to pursue her graduate studies in New York. She's lived in Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, before landing in her current location of Wisconsin, another burr place today. I see a pattern here. Ursula loves reading fantasy, romance, sci-fi, and mysteries, and she enjoys crocheting, traveling, spending time with her wife and young son, and she's a huge fan of dressing up in costumes, loves celebrating Halloween, and was probably a witch in her past life. So I like that. That's good. That's great. So, Ursula, where are you living now?
I'm actually in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is
Oshkosh.
My gosh.
Mm-hmm.
yes, and this is where Oshkosh Bagosh got its start. What was bought out by Carter's.
Yep. Okay.
So it's about an hour and a half north of Milwaukee, and it's pretty much between Milwaukee and Green Bay. So this is definitely Packer land, and we're all very excited for the game this afternoon.
Yeah, Anna, we're like football fans here, and not your kind of football, but our kind of football. So
I love that. That's good.
yeah. And now we have Jaycie Morrison and her 3 novels, Basic Training of the Heart, Heart's Orders, and Guardian Hearts, make up the Love and Courage series. They're all set during World War II, and they combine Jaycie's love with the written word and of history. The Found Jar is her first contemporary romance, and she lives with her wife and whatever wild creatures visit them in the forest. So, Jaycie, you are in where?
I'm right outside of a local town that the locals pronounce Buena Vista. It's really embarrassing to say that to anyone who speaks Spanish or learns Spanish. It should, of course, be Buena Vista, but that's not how they say it.
Yeah.
Call it Buny. So I'm outside the town. I'm about 9,200 feet in altitude, and it's snowing right now, but it's a balmy 22 here. So we're doing great in that respect. Yeah.
And Buena Vista is in Colorado, right?
Yes, that's right. Sorry. Yes, it's almost like right in the middle of the state. So on the west side of the valley, we have the Collegiate Peaks Range. So we have Mount Harvard, Mount Princeton, Mount Yale, Mount Columbia. And on the east side of the valley, we have the Arkansas River. So it's relatively warm here, considering the banana belt of Colorado. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. So the first question I have for all of you is, do you use your hometown or any place that you have specifically lived in as a specific setting in any of your books? So let's start with Spencer.
Yeah, this is I was forced to think about this, I guess, from this panel, and I realized that I guess I probably have never written about a place I haven't been or hung out in or have context for. But my first book, I have a second one coming out, so I only really have one available right now. It's sort of more a take on like the Hallmark town. So both I have an imagined place that I've lived in, but then there's also like the sort of Hallmark things that happen that kind of can't exist in a real town, like a random festival like happening all the time about the town, that sort of thing. And I think too, Yeah, that was sort of like, okay, so like the specific place, like the bar they're in or something, might be a specific bar I've been in, otherwise I can't really talk about it. But everything else is sort of amorphous lifetime. But that's just for that one. In the other ones, they are very specific places, and I think that was sort of an intentional, kind of critique of that. Yeah, so
Okay, great. Anna, how about you?
Goodness me, I mean, all of them. I spoke earlier about Leicester being such a rich place for setting, both in terms of its architecture and in terms of the sort of campaigning that happened in Leicester, that as a place that makes it such a rich resource. So it's definitely my inspiration. So when I think of Highland Fling and Highland Whirl, my Highland series, I send a Leicester girl up to the Highlands, and in where she meets Moira, the broody older woman Highlander. And so Leicester as a city becomes an example of Eve's sort of fish out of waterness. She becomes the city girl in a wild rural landscape, it's a sort of a clever technique. It almost becomes modern versus the sort of the history of Moira's history of the late 1980s. So the city becomes a place of modernity versus a pain of the past. So it works on various levels. When we think of Love's Portrait and beautiful Regency Leicester, it still has a Regency pedestrian walk where the museum is set, with the most beautiful houses. And you begin to imagine who might live in those houses. And there is an amazing history of abolitionists, female abolitionists in Leicester. And so you begin to have a setting which produces a story. And being a museum girl, I like to bring in these sort of things I care about, like hidden histories in museums. So I'm going to have a passionate museum curator, and she's going to live in this Regency house in Leicester. And immediately you begin to have a city which is just sparking your imagination. And of course, Invisible, my latest release. I lived in the city, and I used to pass a fancy dress shop, and it used to be stuffed full of all kinds of things. And again, you imagine who might run it. And of course, there's nothing I like writing more about than a pub. I'm a proper pub girl, and gay pubs in particular in the community. Unless we've got some fantastic ones. I do fictionalize them, of course. But again, it's having those resources in a city to write about. And Invisible, we have Violet Unwin in the dressing up shop, and we have Phoebe Frink in the gay drag bar and drag king bar, and it's wonderful, a wonderful sort of way of bringing out history and bringing out that sense of family and community, which comes from such a vibrant city as Leicester. So yes, so lots in my imagination from where I live.
So the dress shop, did that like spawn the story, or did you go looking for a scene or a specific location or something?
I don't know what I think. I've had time to reflect on Invisible. What I think was at the heart of Invisible was a message I wanted to convey about when you yourself don't have perhaps enough confidence or that kind of chutzpah to muster the carrying on in kind of life, and how so I certainly draw upon sort of my grandma, for example, and it was that idea of, if I had a younger me, and in this case Violet Unwin, what would I want her to learn from me? And then you begin to think, well, let's have Violet be of a generation of Unwins, so that she can have someone in her past when she's struggling to draw upon. So it's finding it's creating so in the dressing up shop, it's an ability to step into a very Mr. Ben style. I don't know whether you know Mr. Ben, the cartoon from the 1970s. I had that in my mind as well. And you can step into the dressing room and be whoever you want to be, and look in the mirror and see your ancestors. So does that answer your question, Julie? Sorry. And so it is all of these sort of place and imagination. So the dressing up shop certainly sparked it. The story came from wanting to convey a feeling.
And I think that sometimes that's, I know I struggle with, I have the feeling, but how do I turn it to words on the page so other people get the feeling? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ursula, how about you? Do you use makeup locations? Do you use any of your previous places that you've lived?
Well, it's ironic because I've lived in so many places, and yet neither of my novels is set in a place that I've lived. They're both set in places that I wish I could live. So Enchanted Autumn was set in Salem, which I visited when I was a graduate student in New York, and it's just my vibe, you know, the whole witch thing. Write a really cute, charming book about a witch in Salem, and so that was kind of like my wish fulfillment for myself. And then the book that's come out just recently, Winter's Spell, is set in P-Town, which I've been to twice for Women's Week. And again, like, I mean, that would be such a dream to live on Cape Cod, especially in a place like P-Town. So again, kind of like a wish fulfillment, like I get to spend some time in the city where like it's highly unlikely I'll ever get to live there. But I can kind of spend some time in my imagination imagining what could that be like. That said, I think it would be kind of fun to set something a little bit closer to home, closer to my heart. So we'll see what happens with future books, but I would love to write something. I've even thought about something maybe like in Door County, which is just a few hours away from my passion. It's got that whole New England vibe, which apparently I'm in love with. So so that's something I've been kind of kicking around as well. It'd be fun to do something kind of local, to be a local author writing about a local setting. Something I've been thinking.
Well, you know, the places you said, the places that you wish you lived, well, that's why it's fiction. We write about, you know, places that we wish we would. Like, wouldn't everybody kind of want to live in a Hallmark movie city? To Spencer's point, well, the city probably, you know, what goes on there. It's talk about the perfect world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my novels are a combination of fantasy and romance genres. And in some ways, I always think that romance is kind of a fantasy genre because, you know, there's no bad sex and there's no bad endings. Everyone's beautiful and the food
That's right.
Good. And it's about making yourself and other people feel good. And I feel like in our world, we just really need that. We need that escape. We need that moment of feeling like everything's cozy and fine and I can escape from news cycle and the job and just all the pressures of everything that's out there. So, you know.
Well, and that's so true because I hear that when, you know, times are tough, romance sales just go through the roof because people want to escape. They want the happily ever after. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Kris, how about you? Any specific locations that you've used, that you've been to, or are you just where I wish I could live?
I actually didn't write about Kansas City until I was a Brit writer. And I used Kansas City. I thought it was a great backdrop because for some reason I wanted a big scene to happen in a museum. And we have the Nelson Atkins Museum, which is, you know, very famous, very huge, very popular place. And so that was kind of my setting. And so I was like, because I am so familiar with it. And I wanted to make sure that anybody who has been to the Nelson would know exactly what I was talking about. And so yes, I do use my own location, but I mean, I've written quite a few books, and even though most of my stories are character driven, I think finding a location comes to me like second. I'll pick a place that I've either been to or I want to write about. I've never actually planned a trip because of a book. It's always after the fact. Like, I really love Ireland. I'm going to write about Ireland, you know, and I've written about, you know, Chicago. I try to here's what I've learned. I've learned to keep it where I don't think people have accents, because you also have to think about the audiobook. and if you have accents, you need to make sure that the narrator, nails it. And so I figured I'm doing Colorado because nobody in Colorado has an accent. So it makes it a little easier, especially since I do have the character-driven books and not the plot or the story or the place. So, but so I have used Kansas City as a backdrop, but not very often.
So Jaycie, is that true? People in Colorado don't have access unless they have come from somewhere else, probably.
Which a lot of people in Colorado do come from somewhere else, but myself included. But yeah, it's pretty neutral here. It is.
So what about your settings? What do you how do you find them?
Well, I guess I just don't have the imagination to write about someplace I haven't been. So I almost always have to visit wherever my location, at least part of where it is. And then I use the internet to sort of make up for stuff that I didn't see or didn't learn or didn't have a chance to know about. Like my newest release, On My Way There, is takes place in a small Texas town, and I've made the drive between Colorado and Dallas, where I'm originally from, a lot of times. And so the town in On My Way There is kind of a compilation of all the little towns that you go through in a certain part of that drive that are sort of pitiful and struggling, and of course Trump loves them, but nobody else does apparently. So it was kind of fun to put them all together into one place. But I've traveled a lot of times to research where I've been or what I'm writing about. And at times I've taken a trip not with a story in mind, but after the fact, when I need a place, I'll think, oh, I went there, I could write about that, and then just sort of beef it up with the internet.
And yesterday there was a panel first thing with Rad and 20 years of BSB, and one of the one of the questions was what has changed the most in the 20 years, and she did say the ability for the internet to do research. You can write a complete book about a place you have never been, because you can go and you can Google it, and you can figure it out. You can look all kinds of things. You can look at pictures and describe what you're seeing as if you're there. So that, definitely gives a helping hand to authors who are trying to describe a place that they've never been. So Kris, a question came in. What is the title with Nelson Museum? Is it, what's it called again?
Well, I have two. I have Shameless, that's Emery's point of view, and then Not Guilty is the full length that's from the other character's point of view.
Okay, great. Thank you. So how do you, I know some of you have already talked about how do you research your locations? Has anyone thought, like, I want to set a story in Hawaii and let's go there and find it? Or have you, I mean, I did. It was like, oh, gee, I think I'll write a story there. Let's go see it. Research. Do you, like Jaycie said, sometimes it's the idea comes from you after you've been there, but has anyone started with a place in mind and then went to find out, a road trip?
Yeah, I did. I knew that when I was writing The Found Jar, I knew it needed to be at a beach location, and living in the mountains is not, gonna do that. So I also had a character that I knew was sort of afraid of bridges, so it needed to be sort of a island. Anyway, we ended up taking a long weekend trip to the Outer Banks, and that's where the book is set. So that was a lot of fun.
Anyone else go to a specific destination?
I spoke about the sequel of Highland Fling being Highland Whirl. I wrote Highland Fling in 2017, and I was fortunate enough to return to the Highlands again in 2019. And because I thought there might be a sequel, I persuaded my mother to do a boat trip on Loch Ness, and she took a little bit of persuading, but I had a master plan that I'd be then using that trip. So it gave me a chance to revisit than where I had been, but with a writer's eye, because when I first went to the Highlands in 2017, I was experiencing things as a visitor, not as a writer. So it's interesting to return to the same place with a different mindset and to see whether it changes it for you instead of imagination and your own experience. Whether perhaps looking at it with a writer's eye, it carries a kind of, not a heaviness with you, but you almost become an observer of the experience rather than experiencing it. And so yes, kind of visiting with a view to writing.
Now, Spencer, a question has come in. Do you plan on having a one of your next books with DC as the setting?
My new book, which I just got my author copy of, so I can hold it up, comes out in February. Never a bridesmaid. I had to check. It takes place partially in DC. Yeah, like there are it goes between, it takes place in in somebody else's wedding schedule, like from the beginning of like the bridesmaids trip or what do you call it, or bachelorette party to like the wedding. So it goes into a few different places, but the parts that are in DC are definitely places that I go and hang out in. But I actually kind of picked places from different weddings I've been in that I like really hated. And so they're like very specific times. I mean, I didn't hate the thing itself, but sometimes wedding related things can be sort of, can be kind of like hetero and like very intensely traumatic for me. So I specifically chose different bachelorette parties or things from weddings or weddings themselves that I had some issues with. So, and I think too, with setting, I'm not that good at description. And so, and I want to work on that. So my settings are more conflict causing. Like they bring, I think that I might use them differently. Like I use them sort of to forward things or create problems, or even the Hallmark thing is sort of a conflict thing, right? Because it's the incompatibility between that sort of setting and, authenticity. And so, yeah, I loved Highland Fling, and I think you had a great environment, and I couldn't imagine describing someplace and being able to feel sort of all that. So yeah, I'd like to work on that though, because I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, my settings are more complex, and DC, yeah, I live there and I love it. But I also, I think I use it for the logistical issues that are caused by cities and things. So
So does anybody, when you describe a place, is it in your head, or are you looking at a picture or a photograph or something on the web? Do you describe it from that aspect? Ursula, how about you?
Yeah, well, because I've been to Salem and P-Town before, and I'm kind of a shutterbug, so I've got a lot of my own photos that I can look back on. I've got memories, and I want to balance like the fact that like it is fiction and I can do what I want. I can insert a restaurant or a bar or a club that doesn't exist, right? Because I have that kind of power as the author. But when it comes to things like street corners or neighborhoods or distances, like there were definitely things that I wanted to chat with. In both of my books, I've got characters who go on a date on a hike, which probably says a lot about me. And so I wanted to make sure, I was like, is there like a trail near Salem where you could go and drive there within 15 minutes, right? Where would you go? And because both of the times that we went to Provincetown, we were at Women's Week, and so we were going to a lot of panels, and so we didn't have time to explore a whole lot. So again, like I wanted to make sure, like if you wanted to go on a hike near P-Town, like where would you go? And I keep it kind of vague in the book, but like if someone knew about it, I wanted to make sure that they weren't like, oh, this is all wrong. right?
Mhm.
So like I also wanted them to go to like in winter spell they go for like a high tea. So I just like double checked, like, is there a tea shop somewhere on Cape Cod? And sure enough, there is. So like I don't name it specifically, but I just kind of wanted to make
Mhm.
sure that like if there was someone who was really nitpicky, that they would be like, oh, okay, that does exist. Something like that does exist.
Right.
I
Right.
try to balance like people who are very detail oriented as readers, versus like the needs of the story and the characters.
Mhm. So Kris, have you had, you know, to Ursula's point, have you, if you've used a specific, have you used specific places before?
Well,
Let's
as a
start
matter of
there.
fact, I just wrote last night a hike that my characters go on in Vancouver. So I had to Google the distance, you know, from downtown Vancouver to any sort of trailhead that's approximately like a 6-mile hike. Is
Mhm.
there, you know, how long does it take? And I feel like for me, the thing I Google most is distance, like maps and things like that. Like if I live in Hollywood, how long does it take to get to the airport? You know, with
Mhm.
traffic and things like that, because it looks like it's, you know, super close. And then when you like go to Waze and you look it up, it's like 4 hours. So I have to be realistic with that. You know, I know that in extremely large cities, it's going to take time to get places. And so
Mhm.
for me, it's more of a time thing. You know, not everybody has been to Ireland, not everybody has been to Kansas City, not everybody's been to Chicago. So there is some sort of suspension of, you know, I get literary license, I can kind of, you know, as long as I'm realistic about it, I think it's fine. But I usually Google distances the most.
Mhm.
And I don't really call out places, specific places, because 10 years from now, I want, you know, if that place is gone, I don't want, you know, oh, well, it's not there anymore. So I just make it up. Like I just wrote a whole book about P-Town, never called it P-Town, and everybody knows exactly what it is. They know exactly what place I'm talking about when I say the coffee shop, because it's not the Wired Puppy, which sadly is no longer there. But it is a
Mhm.
coffee shop. You know, and just certain things, you know, oh, well, this is this place and this is that place. So,
Mhm.
you know, but like I said, most of the time it's character driven. It's not really place driven, or it's more of a internal stuff going on with my character. So place to me is secondary. I mean, I do have to be a very because Ursula said yes, that people really will go and check your information. And I wrote a book and somebody checked my information and I'm like, I'm never doing that again because I was wrong. So I was like, well, okay, I'm making shit up from now on. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the best way to go. I think
yeah.
one of my books is very specific, and I think, oh wow, you know, because you're right. People will say, no, it's
They
not
will.
next to, it's not next to the Cowtown bar. It's down the
Yeah.
street, or you know. So yeah.
And there
Yeah.
are no skyscrapers in Maine.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
like,
okay,
but you know, reader, it's fiction. It's like,
right,
you know, it's all in your head. You know, any sci-fi and werewolf and all that
right.
kind of stuff is not real.
They're not
That's
real.
just, it's not real. Just kind of get into it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How about you, Jaycie? You know, is the setting, do you use the setting as the book, or does your characters drive the setting? How does it work with you?
Yeah, I'm mostly a character driven writer too. And so I think about the people first, and then what they might be doing will, in some part, determine the setting.
Mhm.
And then I guess too, their fears, their weaknesses, their flaws can also affect the setting.
Mhm.
So I think all of those are features of it. The setting is almost like a character in some of the stories I've written. For the historical romance series, they're at the Women's Army Corps camp in Fort Des Moines, Iowa during World War II, which is a real thing, was a real
Mhm.
thing. So of course that's going to highly influence everything that happens. Their day is set by, what the training is and, that kind of thing. So I think in some cases it's like that. I'm a Googler too. I love the Google Street View
Mhm.
that you can do if you're wanting to describe a building in a place that you've been, but you
Mhm.
can't exactly remember how that looked and you wanted to use that one. And didn't take a picture of it, Ursula. Sorry, I'm not real good about photographing things. So you could do the street view and see exactly, what things look like. Oh, I have to go around that big corner. Okay, well then, so that's useful too.
So Spencer, you answered a question in the chat. The question was, once you determine the setting, do you try to develop it as a character, or does it become a device to change scenes and develop other characters? So let's kind of pose that question around the table. So Spencer, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I just yeah, for me, it is a means to conflict. And the place that would create the most interesting sort of problems or things are the things I chose. Like in my new one, they go at the bachelorette party, they're at this like very high up house in Asheville, and Asheville has all these hills, and I've been there for this sort of thing, and I was in this Airbnb that like couldn't be reached by small cars. It could only be reached by large cars because of the incline, and I'm like very scared of heights. And so this to me felt like a very perfect place to create that sort of issue, or multiple issues, logistical issues that have to do with heights issues, and just sort of like it, that then heightens how, uncomfortable you might be in a setting and stuff, how uncomfortable I was. But yeah, so to me, that is to me a richer place to choose, because then I can let the characters be and let things come up and see how they would react. But if I choose a place that's sort of, too unnoticeable to me, or like I remember that place really well because I was very anxious the whole time I was there. Like I remember every detail, of Airbnb. I'm in it right now, but if I felt sort of relaxed, I probably wouldn't remember it like that. I would need photos and things like that. So that would be like an example of how I chose that setting and how much easier it was to write from that place than when I'm in someplace more relaxing, or yeah.
Anna, how about you?
Can you repeat the question, Julie, for me?
Sure. Well, once you determine what your setting is, do you try to develop it as a character, or does it become more of a device to change scenes or develop other characters or bring out something in your character about that scene? Like Spencer said about, I'm afraid of heights. So what if the character is afraid of heights, then how will she react how will the other main character help her get through that, or make fun of her or something like that? So do you use scenes or locations to help bring out issues in your characters, maybe?
I think so. We were chatting at the beginning, weren't we, about sending poor old city girl Eve to the Highlands of Scotland. It became, because it was so rural, Eve's ability to adapt and cope almost became a signifier as to whether she was going to adapt and cope to a relationship with Moira Burns. Because if Eve couldn't cope in that rural setting, you have to assume that relationship wouldn't sustain, and therefore the setting put pressure onto that city girl. So it weighed in, if you like, it increased the odds. And I always love the brooding lock in Highland Fling and Highland World, because it's there sort of as a sort of not a menacing feature, but like a sort of making it a sort of trepidatious place, kind of an other place. You would never find a brooding lock in the middle of Leicester. And so definitely it's a wonderful tool setting to ramp up jeopardy, if you like. So that would be my answer, Julie.
Okay, great. Jaycie, how about you?
Yeah, I think that I've used characters as or setting as something that influences the character, certainly. And on my way there, Max is from a small Texas town, so I can't really write her accent per se, but I can use some of her phrases, some of the phrases that I heard growing up, that kind of develop her character by how she talks, by how by how she thinks about things. When she describes someone's attitude as being colder than a cast iron commode, you you got to get a feel for her, even though that's influenced by where she lives. I'm sure it's not a common saying, but something I heard growing up. So I could use the setting a lot. It helps in the characters and in the conflict as well.
So do any of you use those grown-up phrases or growing up phrases? Like Jaycie said, colder than a cast iron
Commode.
commode. That paints a picture. Talk about a setting. That paints a picture. Has anyone else used a phrase that they heard growing up to help describe something? No? Okay.
Like
One of the-
unwelcome as a porcupine in a nudist colony. Come on, we've all heard that one, right?
Yep.
One of the it's not supposed to a phrase, but one of the resonating kind of sayings that happens in Invisible comes from the Leicester local suffragettes, and you couldn't make this up in fiction. And they carry a banner, and across the banner is always and always look towards the light. And it's the most kind of resonant phrase. It is some of these phrases, you know, as you say, we carry them for our path, they're our sayings, but they're so very meaningful. And you know, I think it's as a writer, it's tuning into some of these, isn't it? Some of these sort of that capture beautifully a moment of feeling or expression. But yeah, I like the chamber pop theory.
Anna, do you find, excuse me, do you have a wide readership in the US, or is it just predominantly over in the UK? Do you know?
It's very difficult for me necessarily to tell. I would like to think that the US audience have a great affection for the UK and for UK storytelling, and I think that's something quite special between us. It's certainly in terms of UK readers, they perhaps would recognise perhaps a manner of writing or style of writing, but I like the difference that my writing brings. So I would hope, I would like to think that there's an audience in the US who enjoy my work and enjoy visiting the UK, if you like, through me. Really.
Have you gotten any you know, any emails from folks who have said that, you know, some readers in the US who've said, because of what you've written, I want to go there, or this sounds like a beautiful place, or I had no idea what the hell you were talking about? I mean, have you gotten any of those kind of comments?
Yeah, great affection for the Highlands of Scotland. I think that it means a lot to the US audience. They always speak about wanting to go and how, you know, they've traveled there with me. That's always lovely. And often, sometimes I receive emails about the sentiments I'm expressing in a book. I had a lady recently speak about being moved by Invisible. And of course, you know, setting is part of that setting up of those emotions and those feelings. So yes, like I say, you hope you bring people with you in your imagination to these places which offer a sort of consolation and you know, somewhere to aspire to go to see or to enjoy being in, whether they're fictional settings or real ones.
So I know, you know, when I write, you have to think about how do I get the characters together? They have to be together to show the conflict and to work through the conflict. So I always think, okay, what's the next place I can put them together? And so do you all think the same way, or does it just kind of, the conflict puts them in a place, or do you stop and think, where next do they need to go to get together? Anybody? Ursula, oh, you don't have to raise your hand. You can.
The academic Zoom, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in both cases, the setting is kind of crucial to bringing the characters together, but also in creating some conflict. So in Enchanted Autumn, we have a real life witch. We also have a British and English researcher who comes to research the witch trials and the historical witch trials, and she's a historian and she's avidly like anti-magic, not a believer in anything you know, supernatural. And so that kind of creates the conflict, and it's centered around Salem, right, which is this place where fantasy and this horrible real history kind of collide, right? And then in Winter's Spell, we have two characters who end up, they knew each other in college, they were roommates in college for 1 year, and then they lost touch. And they both end up in P-Town over the winter. And, you know, one of them ended up dropping out of college, and she feels very like, you know, kind of detached from any kind of intellectual life. She's an outdoorsy kind of gal. And the other person is on P-Town specifically to put on a Shakespeare play. She's a theater director, and she's putting on a Shakespeare play, and it's The Winter's Tale, which is not one that's like super popular, right? Not a lot of people are familiar with it. It's a very weird play, even if you're a Shakespeare scholar. And so that they're both in P-Town for different reasons. And they're interested, there's a spark that was sparked back, you know, 9 years earlier. There's this conflict between like, are we going to be compatible, our interests compatible when we have such diverse kind of like backgrounds and reasons for being.
Okay. Anyone else kind of have to think, well, how can I get them together next and figure out what that looks like? Is it like they're on a boat at the lake or at a festival, anything like that?
Sometimes I'll use location as my conflict, meaning that the character goes to one place and they have to make a decision. Do they want to stay with her or go back to their life, you know, at home? So I think it's a valid conflict, because I'm not one for conflicts in books. It's really hard for me to come up with something. So I'm like, oh, I'll just have place and destination be the conflict. So, so as we were talking about our last couple of questions, I wrote Breakthrough, which was basically a journalist from LA has to go to Alaska to go interview somebody. And she's completely out of her realm of everything. Like Alaska just sets her on her ass. And so, because she has no experience, she has no idea what it's like up there. And so that is one book that had a character that had the actual location as a character. And so on top of that, I got to have the whole, well, she's in Alaska and I'm down here in LA, and how will it work? Oh my gosh, you know, so location, it can be like a whole bunch of different things in a book.
Right, for sure. So as a reminder to everyone that is dialed in this morning, all of our 2023 ebooks are on sale, 20% off during this bookathon. So that sale will end Sunday. So excuse me. So certainly go to boldstrokesbooks.com and take a look at all of those. We have a couple of minutes left for any final questions from anyone. Just enter them into the Q&A. So one of my final questions, I think, for everybody is, how important is the cover to the setting of the book? What do you think about that, Spencer?
Yeah, it's interesting. My first book, so this is my first book, and this is the cover. It takes place in this Hallmark town, so this is a city, right? But and I would think that would be kind of deceptive, but part of why I liked that it ended up being the city is because I think that the central conflict, you know, the Hallmark town creates this sort of fantasy thing, right? And usually in a rom-com or a romantic Lifetime movie, the urban person says, oh my God, I'm going to live in this rural place with you, right? And I'm going to give up my, CEO job, and I'm going to be, like cut wood or something, right? And so in this, they go back, right? Because like chosen family is also family, and sometimes home isn't a safe place, even though it has all these like nice things. So for me, even though the book takes place mostly rural, I actually really loved that the cover ended up being the place they're in the least, but ends up sort of being, I think, where the heart is of it. So for me, that was a great question for my situation, because yeah, the cover was, I think, sort of, it guided, where the heart is for me. So.
How about you, Ursula?
Well, I wish I had Enchanted Autumn. I forgot to bring it up with me, but that the cover of that, I wanted it to have like a Bewitched vibe, like the show from the 60s. And there's a statue of the main character Samantha from Bewitched in Salem, so that's kind of like the connection there. And because there's a mermaid in Winterspell, I wanted to make sure there was a little tail, right? And of course, Cape Cod is surrounded by water, so that's helpful. And I thought a lighthouse would be really kind of neat to have. But then I realized as I was writing the book, I was like, well, we have to have some scenes with a lighthouse in the background, so I better. Yeah, so in some ways, like the cover design, because you get it so early, you're like, okay, I guess I need to like incorporate this somehow, because again, like, if there's a lighthouse on the cover, there should be a lighthouse in the book, right? So
and your readers you'll have a reader who tells you if there's not. Yeah. Jaycie, how about you? What do you think about how the covers play into the setting of the scenes?
Oh, as a reader, I know too that I'd be really upset if there was a lighthouse on the cover and there wasn't one in the story. So I can relate to that. But yeah. But I guess in on my way there, Max becomes a truck driver, and I don't know if that was strictly because in all my travels back and forth between Dallas and Colorado, I've passed a lot of truck drivers. There's just a lot of driving involved. Texas is really big.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have highway scenes, you're gonna have, stops, rest stop scenes. So I think it makes sense to have as much, without giving away anything too involved in the story, but I think it makes sense to have as much as you can in the way of authenticity in your covers.
Kris, what do you think?
I try to keep my covers. I mean, people always say don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do. And I try to keep them simple. I try to keep them eye-catching. I saw that somebody read Catch based on the cover alone, so thank you for that. And if a book is sexy, I want the cover to be sexy, Temptation and Catch and Not Guilty, they're all sexy. So I kind of want, I want somebody to be drawn to it just because they're like, why is this? And I like Breakthrough, it's snow and there's a crocus coming out of the snow. And because first of all, like I have a hard time coming up with, like, I give Sandy a paragraph and I'm like, this is what I'm going to write. And she's like, what's the conflict? I'm like, I don't know. And then she's like, okay. And so then I have to try to figure out a cover based on a book I haven't even written yet. And so I have to keep them very, very vague because like Ursula said, like, I can't have a lighthouse and then not even talk about being on the ocean or being in the water. I mean, so that's why my covers are very simplistic because I have yet to write the book. I mean, honestly, yeah.
Yeah, the cover comes before the book a lot of times.
Right.
Anna?
Yeah.
Anna, how about you? What do you think about how the cover of your book sets the tone of the setting?
Okay, let's have a little look at Invisible. So as you can say, it's a brave cover. And a very important scene, very important setting in Invisible is the Drag King bar, the Banana Bar, run by Mr. Duke D. And so what I love about it is you see the nods to the idea of campness of drag, but also this is Violet as I see her at the end of her journey from being this rather lost young lady to being this feisty young woman with a new confidence. And when I look at this image, I think of Violet. I think of the journey she's been on. And so yes, that's very much the Banana Bar and those kind of really safe spaces for our community, and that's what my cover speaks of when I look at it for me.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, we are up against time. I thank all of you for joining again, and I thank all of you, all the authors, for joining with us this morning, and all of you for dialing in today. Again, go to the Bold Strokes Books site and get your ebooks that are on sale. Also, there's a variety of sessions throughout the rest of today and tomorrow as well. Come back and join us. Also, join us next week, Saturday and Sunday, and we'll be doing more of the same. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.